1 second, please.
Oh. So there are some new ovens I have on the market that only go to 600 degrees. 600 degrees is not really enough to be considered libun chamer. You would have to use that oven and kasher it in the libun kal method by waiting the time and making sure it's clean, and then kashering the oven
Right away.
in that
what's
way.
The problem?
Huh?
Somebody right away asked me, what's the problem?
What's the problem with the?
No.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
You want to? What Rabbi say, if anybody wants to give Rabbi Greenberg a breather, limdach Torah deracheretz litin hefsek min parsha leparsha. If you want to give him a breather, you could. Let's try. If you want to throw a question, a chat, fine. He's. So you want to drink?
I'm giving a water score.
Yeah.
If I get a breather, I'm not going to get to nearly finish what I have to say.
There's your first breather. Here, you have to scroll. Here, let me show you how you scroll.
Can I wait till the end for questions?
Yeah, okay. But, who's asking us? Wow, that's a long breather. It is written in the... Okay, this is a Shane Lubavitcher question. Okay. Okay, there you go.
You'll answer the question.
Okay,
I see the question about a microwave. I was going to get to that. Microwaves, we do not kasher for Pesach. I know that I believe the OU says that it's kasherable. The microwave is mostly plastic. And generally, the accepted custom is not to kasher plastic for Pesach. There's a machlokes even during the year. Most are makel during the year. Some are machmer even on that. Most are makel to kasher plastic during the year. That would apply to dishwashers, which mostly today are plastic, unless you have a stainless steel one. The tshuva for a Moshe that was written years ago that you cannot kasher dishwashers, that was talking about the porcelain dishwashers that they first came out with. You don't really find that today. And therefore, during the year, we do kasher dishwashers. You have to know the right method. We're not going to talk about that now. It's not for Pesach. And we do kasher microwaves during the year, but not for Pesach. Thank you. Go ahead. Now, let's move on to the stovetop. The stovetop, there are many different types of stovetops that people have. There are three basic types that we find on the market. There's the electric grate, electric coil, there's the flat glass top electric, and there's the gas stovetops.
Pesach Walter. The hair question, the Lubavitch question, you'll leave for me, okay? It's not. The last year I gave a share about Loises Goy to do. We're not going to make Loises Goy to do here, okay?
Now, if you have the stovetop that just has an electric coil, so all you have to do is turn on the coil till it gets red hot to the highest and leave it on for 15 minutes. That will kasher that. Anything will be burnt out. The gas ranges, so they have the burner, and the burner is covered by the grate. Now, the way to kasher the grate, turning on the burner itself is not enough because the grate is bigger than the burner. So you have to spread the heat over the grate. There's different ways to do it. You can cover the whole stove with a blech and put the burners on, and it will spread the heat. I would advise not to do that because if you're doing all four burners at once, it can get very hot. Most of the stovetops today are part of the oven. The oven has an electric panel on the back, and I know more than one person has blown out that electric panel because of the heat emanating from the four burners covered by the blech. So it's probably advisable to do. You could do two at once and try to vent it out of the sides. If you're going to cover it, you can cover it with heavy-duty foil, maybe double it over. That won't burn up in 15 minutes. Cover the two of the burners on the left and then do two on the right. Fold up the edges, not down but up, so the heat should be able to escape in the front of the oven and not in the back where the electric panel is. And 15 minutes like that will kasher those burners, and that's okay. The actual disc where the flame comes out of, you don't have to remove that. It's going to get kashered by itself. The bigger problem is the flat glass tops. Those, many poskim advise if you're building a new house and it's up to you, you should not get those. I'm told that a lot of the new apartments only allow electric, and it's very difficult on the market already to find the old-fashioned electric coils because this is the new thing. So you can kasher those. You turn on the burner for 45 minutes on high. Again, you don't have to do all four at the same time. You could do each one separately or two at a time, and that would kasher it. The glass between the burners really should not be used for Pesach. It should not be considered kashered. If any food falls on there, even in the gas ranges, you really don't use that area between because it's not kashered properly. It should be covered for Pesach. Covering the glass tops could be difficult because it could crack the glass. Maybe just putting a cover between, certainly not the place where the pots go on itself. The glass tops are very fragile and delicate. But if you have a gas stove or a coil stove, you should cover the space between the burners, and that would be okay.
The question: how long did you say for electric?
The electric coils is just 15 minutes. Once it reaches the highest temperature, it doesn't have to be that long. But the price can say for the glass top, it should be longer, and it should be 45 minutes. Some say half an hour. I would say 45 minutes.
Shmuley Litvin right now is actually in the middle. He answered for you. He's actually right now in the middle of kashering somewhere.
Okay. Okay. As far as if you self-clean your oven, as far as covering the door, there are different minhagim. The problem with the oven door is that the heat doesn't reach as well to the oven door as the rest of the oven. So some say Kabbalah Kachpolta, it gets as hot as it always does during the year. The problem is many hold Kabbalah Kachpolta doesn't work for Libun, it only works for Hagala. Libun has to be hot enough to be able to get the chametz out. So some will cover the door after the self-cleaning process. Make sure certainly it's clean. You could use, if you can't get all the stains off, you could spray it with bleach or ammonia and the like, and then cover it or don't cover it, depending on your minhag. If you cover it, make sure not to cover the gaskets that keep the oven sealed shut. That could ruin the whole working of the oven. Sinks. Again, there's many have the custom to use inserts, whether or not they kasher. If you have an enamel sink or the like, it's not kasherable. The metal sinks, which most have today, are kasherable. You kasher with Iri Kli Rishon. Make sure the water is really at a boil and pour onto the sink. Each spot on the sink has to be hit by the kiluach, by the flow of water. It's not enough to spread. So it could be you'll go through a few pots and it takes time. It's not something which could happen in just a few minutes. But if you do it right, then you want to not use the sink for 24 hours before. You want to also kasher the faucet. After you finish the sink, you can run the hot water through the faucet and pour hot water outside the faucet, all sides, top, bottom. And many will hold you should replace the filter on the on the end of the faucet, and that's kasherable. That's the basic things of kashering. I want to move on a little bit to Pesach night. There is more to discuss with kashering, how to cover the countertops and cover the fridge and freezer and the like. But let's move on to the next topic and actually talk about Seder night.
I got a quote that a certain vibes from a city would love what you're saying because they passing exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
Long.
They can look on the Beis Yisrael website for the Pesach guide that I've put up there. And
what's your website?
BeisYisrael.org. BaisYisroel. BeisYisrael.org has there should be a link to a Pesach guide which includes these kashering tips and more. Now let's move on a little bit to the Pesach night. I mean, we could also talk about before preparations for Pesach night. Let's talk about purchasing matzah before Pesach. Now, it is brought in halacha that there's an Indian to go actually bake the matzahs yourself. It's brought from the Rosh. The Rosh would go and bake matzahs, and the question is why here we are more makbid to take part in something ourselves if we can have someone else bake the matzahs and have the matzahs by the Seder. There's always an Indian of mitzvah by yosemi b'shluchai, but is the mitzvah really baking the matzahs? The mitzvah just eating the matzah? It seems there is some Indian in afiyas hamatzahs also, and there's a source that's brought from the pasuk Ushmartem es hamatzos, talks about matzah shmura, but part of that is actually being there and being shomer the matzahs yourself and being involved in the baking process. Now, it's easy for us to say that we should go bake matzahs. When I used to live in the East Coast, I went every year to bake matzahs. Living in Minnesota, it's a little difficult. We don't really have a bakery. There was for a few years a bakery in Chicago, which is almost next door as we consider it. That bakery, I believe, is no longer in existence. I did get to go back last year. It doesn't happen too often. I'm here 16 years. I went once to bake matzahs. So how could you fulfill this mitzvah of afiyas matzahs when you don't have a matzah bakery in town? So there are a few things that the poskim suggest to have the best that we can to fulfill this mitzvah when we live out of town. First of all, the idea of getting chabura matzahs. Again, that at least you're getting a shliach to do that for you, and not just buying matzahs off the shelf, but a chabura that goes and a group that goes and spends the time and putting in the effort. There's many chumras that every chabura does more than the regular bakery does when they bake the matzahs for the regular runs, and that is somewhat a kiyum of shmartem es matzahs, making sure you get matzahs from those chaburas that have these extra chumras and stringencies. That is something that we can do at least to the best of our ability. There's also the idea of once you get your matzahs and wherever they're shipped from and you get the matzahs before Pesach, to search and to open the box before Pesach and look at each matzah. Check for the nefuchos where the matzah might be have a bubble in the middle. Check for the kfulos where the matzah might be bent over. Now, it's important to realize that in halacha it pays a lot of attention to this concept of nefuchos and kfulos. Today's matzahs that are so thin, matzahs could be very thick. We just don't have the know-how or the nervin, let's say, to build. It's more the know-how to bake the matzahs that are thick. Like they used to have lechem apanim was a tefach, 4 inches thick, and it was still matzah. We can't do that today. We don't have that ability and that expertise to make sure every single part of that matzah within is actually matzah, not chametz. So we bake the matzahs very thin, and when you bake the matzahs very thinly, it's not really such a problem. Something is a little bit of a bubble, something's a little bit out of shape, and it looks like it's a kafula. It takes a lot to have a real kafula that could be chametz. It could happen, and it does happen, but at least if you spend the time checking the matzahs erev Pesach for the nefuchas, for the kafulas, make sure the matzahs are okay and they are good. That is also a little bit of a kiyum. So again, to the best of our ability, to be able to take part in the afiyas matzahs as best as we can. Now comes Seder night, and we start with Kaddish. We make Kiddush on wine. Halacha says the wine, lechatchila, should be wine which was roi for the mizbeach. It should not be mevushal. It should not be cooked. It's something which many, again, certainly in outlying areas are not so makbid with during Kiddush throughout the year, even though Kiddush also is something which lechatchila, if you have no reason not to, should be not mevushal. Many of us have guests, people that would invalidate the wine, and therefore we don't buy yain that's not mevushal during the year. Pesach is a time to be extra careful with that. It's specific in halacha. We try to have wine which is not mevushal. We try to have red wine. We try to have red wine because there's more than one reason why we try to have red wine. There's a couple of reasons. One reason is because red wine, it says, is more chashuv. Red wine is generally considered more chashuv than the white wine. Also, it's a zecher to the dam. It's a zecher to the blood that Klal Yisrael shed and Pari made us bleed in Mitzrayim, and therefore we have red wine. Now, that being the case, what happens if a person has white wine which is more chashuv than the red wine? So halacha says he should take the more chashuv wine, but he still wants to be mekayim the din of red wine. So some suggest he should mix a little bit of red wine into the white wine to make the white wine red. Now, the question is, are you fulfilling the din of red wine that way? So if the vart is just to have a red color because of the dam, so that's true, then you will fulfill that. Although the price can say food coloring would not work, even though it's red wine. That's not. It has to be red wine through the wine, the wine shaboy. But if the reason is because of the chashivas of the red wine, you're not really fulfilling that by putting a drop of red to color the white wine. But be that as it may, many will do that l'chatchila. If they have a better white wine they want to use, they'll color it with red. There is a shaila in the halacha whether or not you're allowed to do that on Yom Tif. When we know ein tzviya ba'oichlim, we paskin. The Sharatzian actually says that we should try to avoid it even so, even though ein tzviya ba'oichlim. The way to avoid that is to put the red wine in first and pour the white wine over the red wine. Many hold that it's not a problem, certainly for the sake of a mitzvah, to have the red wine l'chatchila. It could be done on Yom Tif. Many will say that you should do it before Yom Tif. But it's something to think about as you prepare. You're buying the wine before Yom Tif. Have in mind what type of wine you want to have. How important is it to drink wine? Let's say a person gets a headache and he gets sick. He doesn't feel well after the wine. He's not used to drinking alcohol. Today there are so many wines on the market that you can buy wines. The Matukal, I think, is 3% alcohol. Some place can hold that's not even enough to be considered wine. You need at least 4 or 5. The general guideline to be considered wine is something which is different for you. If you never drink wine, 3% might give you a hit. If someone drinks wine on a regular basis, 12%, the 5%, the 7% might not do it for you. It's not something that's the immediate mashak or something which makes you feel that you're drinking wine. That's the general guideline to be considered drinking wine. Now, if the person gets sick, the person that doesn't feel well, it does say in halacha a person should try to drink wine to the best of it. The Gemara talks about a Meira who got sick and headache, he had to tie something around his head until Shavuos because of the wine. Now that's extreme and it's not necessary la halacha if a person is not able to do that. But it shows the importance that the halacha places on drinking wine over grape juice. Now, the Mishnah Berurah does say that if a person is koiv reish, does get a headache, does feel mitzta'er from the wine, then he wouldn't have to. He wouldn't have to drink wine. The question is what mazikoi means. Does it mean that the person has to fall into bed and mamash not be able to function, or the fact that he has a headache and he's not feeling well? Mishnah Berurah seems to hold even if he's not feeling well. And the Sharatzian says the reason is because it's not derech cheres. The whole reason why we're drinking wine is derech cheres, to show that freedom and that the freedom from bondage in Mitzrayim. It's not derech cheres, says the Sharatzian. If it's going to make me sick for the rest of the night and for the rest of Pesach, that's not derech cheres. There are others who argue. The Piskei Teshuvos actually brings a couple of Chuvas Farm that seems to say not like the Mishnah Berurah, and seem to hold that even in a case where a person's going to get sick, they suggest the person should drink wine. But if you look in the Piskei Chuvas, his raya that he brings is from a halacha that's not talking about wine. He's bringing a Maram Shik, he's bringing a different Malkiel. They're talking about matzah, and they're talking about the halacha that matzah and other mitzvahs, even if a person's going to get sick after the matzah, so then they hold that unless it's a sakana, they hold that a person should have the chiyuv to eat the matzah. To compare that to wine is a little bit of a stretch, because like the Sharatzian said over here, it's a din of derech cherus. And even if a person will get a little sick, by other mitzvahs he should do that. If it's not derech cherus, it could be that the Mishnah Berurah would agree to the halacha by matzah, but will still be saying what he says by wine. So that's concerning the wine for the Seder.
He wants to know if a lot of people can't drink alcohol
because of their medication.
Yes, diabetes. So a person has medication issues certainly should not mess with that. He's got to speak to his doctor and to his rav and make sure that he's not gonna have anything. Diabetic is the classic example of someone who has a lot of problems on Pesach about eating and drinking the things that we have by the Seder. And that's not for this discussion, but we do have some of Makahil like that. And yes, you should discuss that with your rav. Definitely, some of the things might have leeway in that case.
Psychosis also.
Let's talk about grape juice. A diabetic has a problem with grape juice also. Now, there's a question of the Paiskim in general. If a person drinks grape juice, is he Makayim the din of yayin? And there's a big discussion in the Paiskim. If the Mekrei Kodesh, Psi Pesach, Frank writes that it could be, even though for other halachas like Kiddush, we say that grape juice is considered yayin, when it comes to the Seder, it comes to Pesach night, we need yayin ha-mesameach. It has to be wine that's mesameach. It has to be dafka wine and not grape juice. And there are others who talk about that also. Most who say that it's not l'chatchila would agree that b'di'evet it's okay. But there are many, many paiskim who disagree with Mekrei Kodesh and others, and they talk about the fact that wine and grape juice, just like for Kiddush, it's considered wine. For the Seder also, if a person who has a problem with wine and is not able to drink wine, grape juice also would be even l'chatchila to be considered the halacha of drinking yayin for the Seder. They even quote that from the Brisker Rav, the Chazon Ish, the Chabina Rav. Across the board, we have many paiskim who hold that that's okay l'chatchila. And again, a person, if he's able to and has no problem with it, should try to push himself, because all the reasons that we said, wine does have a mila over grape juice. But if a person has a problem, he could drink grape juice. Now, that being said, we should realize some of the grape juices on the market are made from concentrate. That, the paiskim say, is very questionable whether that could be used for the arba kaisis. So if you're going to buy grape juice for the Seder, at least make sure the grape juice is not from concentrate. Make sure it's freshly pressed, and you'll be able to use that for the Seder. Let's talk a little bit about the matzah. We talked about checking the matzahs before. There's an interesting halacha concerning the matzah, which is discussed in the paiskim, and that is, what if I'm a guest by someone else's house? I'm not eating at home, and I'm eating at someone else's house. I know there are some places people bring their own matzah, either because they don't want to incur the cost to the host, or they want to have their own matzah from their own chabura, like we spoke about. But you're by a house, and you're eating the host's matzah. So is there a problem, la halacha, as far as that's concerned? Now, if we look in the halacha, we find that just like by the Daled Minim, on Sukkot, we have a din of lochem. It has to be yours, and you have to own it. If you want to shake someone else's lulav and esrog, you have to get it as a matana, as a gift, and then you can give it back to him afterwards. We have the same halacha by matzah also. The source is really from the halacha of challah in Parsha Shlach, where it says avisai seichem, and the challah has to be yours. And we have a gzeir shava of lechem. Lechem, actually, it's a gzeir shava. The Gemara says, but we compare that to the halacha of matzah, and it's got to be yours. So now I'm eating by someone else's house, and yes, he invited me to come, but what do I have to do to ensure that the matzah is mine and it's not just I'm eating someone else's matzah? So, or for that matter, what about when I buy the matzah? I buy the matzah. Do I have to make an actual kinyan, all the kinyanim, or if I just pay the storekeeper for the matzah? So it's something to keep in mind. When you pay the storekeeper for the matzah, so usually that's fine. The price can say he's big makning you the matzah without the kinyan of hagbah or mashicha, any of the major kinyanim to make a point of that. You bought the matzah, but it is something to think about. And some place can question if you bought the matzah on credit and you didn't really pay him yet, and you're going to pay him after Pesach. Is that a problem? The matzah still belongs to the store owner. He might have given it to use, but you haven't paid for it. And in reality, the way the credit works today, it really is considered that you bought the matzah. But there are a number of concerns, because it could be that you should do a kinyan on the matzah if you pay with credit, but there's a bigger problem with smichas das. There's a concern that the moicher, the seller, might not be comfortable that he's going to get the money for the matzah after Pesach. And if there's any concern on behalf of the moicher, of the seller, that he's not going to get the money, he doesn't have that smichas das, then there is a problem there, and the matzah might not be yours when you eat the matzah by Pesach. So a person really l'chatchila should pay up all the credit before Yom Tif. If a person pays with a check also is the idea is credit, that you're giving permission for the store owner to take money out of your account, even if he hasn't yet. Today a check is like legal tender. Today a check can be passed on to the next guy. It's almost like cash, and we don't really have a problem if a person paid with a check. So that's as far as buying the matzahs. As far as sitting by the seder, as far as the family members are concerned, they're included in the husband, the father, and there's no need for them to make a kinyan. As far as a guest is concerned, it should be stated by the balabas, by the owner of the house, that he is being makna and letting the guest acquire the matzahs, and the guest should have that in mind. Even if he doesn't make the actual kinyan, but at least it should be something that's spoken out and he has in mind, I'm acquiring these matzahs for myself, you're giving me a gift, a present, so that I can have my own matzahs for the Seder. And lahalacha, if a person didn't do that, it still will be yoseh the mitzvah of matzah, but it's definitely outside of yoseh toiv, and definitely l'chatchila to do it that way. As far as the shiurim for the kaisis of yayin, there are many different opinions of how much the kais has to be. It's something we have to realize.
Somebody put something up there. Oh, he put up your thing.
Oh, shkoyach for the link. It's something we have to realize as we come to the Seder this year, that it's Friday night, it's Shabbos. And aside from all the preparations that have to be done beforehand, whether it be checking the romaine lettuce for bugs, whether it be grating the horseradish, whether it be preparing the salt water, whether it be roasting the zeroya and the egg, the one thing that you definitely cannot do after Shabbos begins, if you haven't done it before, is roast the zeroya, roast the egg. If it's just a Yom Tif, the second night Seder, you can't do that on Yom Tif. There are limitations to that. But the one thing you just cannot do if you didn't do it before is that. Everything else, there are ways to do it with shinuyim. And again, this is the basic hilchos Shabbos, hilchos Yom Tif. We're not going to go through it now. The shiur is getting late. But preparing salt water should be done with the shinui. Preparing the charaisa should be done with the shinui. Grating the horseradish should be done with the shinui. Shabbos is much more difficult than Yom Tif. So really, you should have all these things prepared before. But as far as the kaisis are concerned, since the first night, it's Friday night Kiddush, we're more machmer in the Kiddush on Friday night than the Kiddush on Yom Tif night. So even though for the other kaisis you have definitely makom to be mekel, the shiur of Reb Moshe Feinstein was always given as 3.3 ounces of wine as a revius. Reb David Feinstein in the last few years has said that those shiurim are done without the technology they have today, and the shiurim that when he redid the shiurim based on his father's mahalach, it's really 2.9 ounces. So it's just a 3-ounce becher is really all you need for all the kaisis the second night, and the last 3 kaisais the first night. But as far as Kiddush Friday night, you want to have a bigger kais. Reb Moshe's shiur is 4.42 ounces, about 4.5 ounces. Chazon Ish holds 5.2, 5.6 ounces. That's a bigger shiur. For those who like drinking wine, that's fine. You want to just be careful, someone who has an issue with wine, not to have too big of a cup, because you want to be able to last through the Seder. And there is an Indian of drinking the whole cup, or at least Rav Kais,